Master's Notes Part 2, all of human psychology, like the whole thing. So basically, the book proposes a like 3-level model of human brain processing. I don't know how right this is. You'd have to ask a psychologist. But it works for their purposes, which is sort of the point of models. So we have reflective, behavioral, and visceral. Visceral is like the lizard brain thing. That's why I'm not sure how actually accurate this thing is. Behavioral is like learned skills, and then reflective is like you thinking about yourself, and high level cognitive stuff, and various parts of interaction happen on the different levels. Visceral is like when something just feels good or feels bad. That's a visceral one. And then reflective, sort of gets overridden by visceral. There's some interesting stuff in here about the relation between those, and how if you have a good experience with something on a visceral level, that can override a bunch of reflectively bad experiences with it. Like with holidays, where if you had a bad time, you can still see it as good in hindsight. But yeah. And then basically it talks a bit about flow, which is too big a thing to get into here, but it's quite interesting. And how basically between the world and your goal, there's a reflective level, which is plan, there's behavioural, which is specify, and there's visceral, which is perform, and then back the other way, there's perceive, interpret, compare, which is the action cycle of how you interact with things. And then it talks a bit about models, and then interestingly goes into blaming, how humans are blamed for everything, and this creates learned helplessness, and how you falsely blame yourself, and that this is baked in legally, and that's a pretty bad thing. A bunch of people have been held responsible for human error when operating machines, when it's the design of the machine's fault that this error was made, and there's no real good way to legally say that, and it means companies get away with bad designs, and it gets repeated because people are bad at letting other people know when they've made a mistake, which means that a bunch of people could be making the same mistake because of a bad design and just not say anything because they don't want to be seen as stupid, because they think they're stupid even though they're not. So there's basically a philosophy espoused, which is for designers, which is don't blame people when they fail to use your products properly. Difficulties of as signifiers for improvement. Eliminate error messages, instead provide help and guidance. This is interesting. The last one is interesting, but I don't think it's right. Make it possible to correct problems directly from help and guidance messages seems alright. Assume what people have done is partially correct, and think positively. But also the book is avoid criticizing people unless you can do better or show a better way. The book also espouses, as I mentioned, removing human error, because machines should accept normal human behavior, and not punish it. So a big point of his overall thing is machines shouldn't make humans act in certain ways. Machines should act how humans want them to. I reckon this is a lot of why Apple and Facebook have gone wrong. So Facebook and Apple both have this model of the user that if you act exactly like that, their devices are pretty great to use, and Facebook is pretty great to use as a service. If you don't, then they're rubbish. And not rubbish, but fairly bad and have fairly irritating aspects. YouTube also falls into this problem. And that means that like, nobody acts the way their user model actually intends, or a very small number of people, and they don't accommodate that, and that's why these services feel terrible in many circumstances. 7 stages of action comes up here. Like, not just gonna parrot that. And then, like, discoverability, feedback, conceptual model, affordances, signifiers, mappings, constraints. What else? And that's the end of that chapter. So that's basically the book's model of human psychology, is like the 3 levels, and different things will act with different levels, but understanding the relationship between levels is important, because a lot of reflectively bad designs get away with it by being viscerally good, but also engineers are bad at visceral, like they think it shouldn't be considered when it absolutely should. So yeah, next time. What is next time? Tells you how prepared I am. Like, knowledge, and how humans have knowledge and how they also don't.